Boom, we are alive, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us today. It's been about a month since I've made the last video. We're going to be taking a look at Link, Avalanche, Bitcoin, the dollar, and the S&P 500. So with that in mind, we're just going to drop straight into Bitcoin on a smaller time frame. Here we are on the 6 hour. Now, I produced a private newsletter. I really looked like this was going to be distribution. Everything leading up to this moment looked like distribution. And one of the things that's difficult is reminding oneself that these smaller time frames are led by the larger time frames. So here, the distribution time frame, and again, I'll go over a few things here that led me to that conclusion, even though it appears I might have been wrong. One of the things that's helpful is to remind ourselves to zoom out. Because as we zoom out, we start to remember, oh yes, this is a much more bullish picture. To get to where we are took a few hundred days of accumulation. We saw our first signs of strength and our first large breakout. Now we're in an area of resistance. Now my initial thought here was when we got to this $50,000 point that we would see big checks between $36,000 and $42,000. Now we got pretty close. We went all the way down to $38,000 before jumping back up and into the box. But we have to remember, when the trend is bullish, follow with the trend. So when we're down on these smaller time frames, even though I thought this was going to be a distribution, the larger idea is to lean towards bullish. Now that can be dangerous in certain circumstances, and we'll go over that. We'll take a look at Avalanche next. But for now, it does appear that we're going to break above the top of this box here for Bitcoin, and I suspect that we're going to move back towards that $48,000 point and probably move quite a bit higher. Now, one of the dangerous things here, again, is getting caught in the smaller time frames can lead us to scenarios where it looked bearish. There was significantly more supply coming into the downside. We saw increased price action to the downside as well. And that's normally a bearish sign. But again, it's this larger time frame story that we have to keep in mind. And that's what keeps us moving forward. So ultimately, I think what's happening is because we're seeing such a large distrust in the system, things like Bitcoin are going to continue to thrive. In the rest of the ecosystem here, we will see up movements, but there's going to be a ton more volatility. Now, what was unique here is Link. Now, I'm going to go to the larger time frame here on Link, and we're going to take a look at this story here. Because for Link, for those of you that are in the private group and constantly chatting with us, or even in this video, or the videos we share on YouTube, we've had 530 days of accumulation and our first cycle up. Now, what's unique here is Link gives us a kind of similar picture to Bitcoin. Now, this has been the strongest asset in this ecosystem and has actually been leading the way. Now, you might think it's Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, I guess, just gets so much attention. But even from the growth of the middle of the box, Link is up 157%, which is pretty similar to Bitcoin. Now, the other thing that was important here is this long 84-day accumulation cycle that took place. Now, generally speaking, these two up thrusts and this move to the downside, this normally would signal distribution. And that's generally what we're used to seeing. Just as a common denominator within these trading ranges is that when you see an upthrust and then an upthrust with a sign of weakness, that means distribution. And this is one of the important factors to remembering. It took 500 to 600 days of the accumulation cycle to take place to begin with. So the market maker and the operators are not going to give up those positions easily. They want the asset to go much higher, and they want to sell onto more hands of retail. So you can have some level of confidence when you see these large accumulation cycles that that's what will happen next. Now, I'm going to share some of my thoughts as when we can get that wrong and what that looks like, because that happened with Avalanche. I was a little excessively bullish for Avalanche. I'm still bullish for Avalanche. I think it's going to return to the $55 area and probably move up higher. But what was unique about Link is that it had this very strong reaccumulation range, very similar to Bitcoin, and retested the bottom of the range here, which normally just based off the way a trading range can form, you would assume that this would actually be a large sign of weakness, which would lead us into distribution, because you had an up thrust and you had an up thrust, the one on the left here, and an up thrust followed by distribution to the downside. And what normally happens is when you'd come up here, you'd retest the top and then come back down lower. And that's kind of what I assumed was going to happen with Link. But right here in this moment, as we started to turn around, there's actually a few scenarios that gave us the bullish indicator. Now, in the private group, a lot of you guys were playing around with this, but there was bullish divergence that was much more clearly visible on the 2-hour. Here, I will draw this up. 2-hour divergence here, and then on the RSI here, boom, like this. So the 2-hour divergence on the bottom of the RSI and on the price range here. This is what ultimately led to this bullish scenario. On the 2-hour, again, we are seeing some divergence. I do suspect that we're going to see a new trading range form within this area that we're at right now, especially because we're about to hit a lower high in the RSI, and we have bearish divergence to the upside and RSI to the downside here. But again, we have to remember that this is out the back of a reaccumulation range. And generally speaking, when you have a reaccumulation range and you have an SOS out the back, what you get is a nice backup phase. It's usually really tight. The market maker doesn't want to screw around, and then it goes for a big run. I suspect we could see Link still double from here. But mind you, from the middle of the range for Link, we're already up 30%. And more importantly, from some of the first videos where we looked at this primary accumulation range right out the back, up 70%. So Link has done 70% since the primary reaccumulation range at the top of this long accumulation range. Now with Avalanche, I got this kind of wrong. Now I'm going to share what I got wrong, or why I think I got it wrong. For those of you in the private group, you'll know why I got it wrong, because I made a very clear statement about it afterwards. But we had this beautiful, nice reaccumulation channel, falling wedge moving right into the bottom of the spring. On the 2-hour, we had one of the sexiest reaccumulation ranges I've seen in the market today. This was a very easy play. A lot of you guys did really well on this one. And this is what a normal reaccumulation range looks like. It was basically a perfect, almost flawless setup to 100% gain. Now, I think one of the things that I did wrong, and which I want to go over here, because it's always good to recognize our mistakes, is I was aiming for about 60% in growth, and we got 120% in growth. And what had happened was, I'm going to go back and redraw this and pretend that the future hasn't happened yet. There is oftentimes a reaccumulation range that I'm going to draw it very quickly here that looks like this, where you have a move above the box, and the SOS and backup phase right here becomes the next bullish sentiment on the way out. But this moment that we couldn't get back above the trading range, more specifically this line here, was a really bearish signal. So I got stopped out on the way here, lost a nice chunk of the profits that we had taken from this position, and I've just started re-entering a position in Avalanche now. The reason being is this looks like that reaccumulation channel right after the spring, very similar to what we saw here, which was our spring and our reaccumulation range basically outside of the back of the box as our jump across the creek. So I suspect, again, what I got wrong is thinking that this was the trading range here, and now what it looks like is it's actually a much larger trading range, probably something similar to what we'll view with Link. I'll make this a bit bigger so it's easier to see. We'll draw this out with green so it stands out. We'll double down on these lines so again it stands out against the background. I suspect that this is what we're witnessing here. Now there's two reasons for this. Just want to get rid of this here. I think we just saw our spring for Avalanche around on the 15th. I think we're seeing the test right now, which looks like a nice reaccumulation range too. So there's a few positive indicators there. You want to kind of keep constantly reiterating your growth process. Otherwise, it's really easy to have a mistake and then not take a lesson from it. Often when we're trading or making investments, the lessons that we get will walk over so quickly in the aims of trying to make more profit, trying to jump back in or out of positions too quickly, And that's usually a pretty surefire way to lose out. It's better to be patient and make sure whatever things we got wrong, we're rewriting down on a game plan and bringing it to our next set of positions. This way is usually the best way to go. And I suspect, again, what we're going to witness here is a long 82-plus day reaccumulation range. We're approximately 50 to 60 days into that already. So again, if we compare that to Link, from the top of the buying climax to the breakout was around 85 days. It was a long time in the box. And it came all the way up. It went from the bottom of the box to the top of the box, back down to the bottom box, to the top of the box, to the bottom of the box, to the top of the box, to the bottom of the box, almost 4 times. Very, very discouraging. There's actually one of you who kept being like, oh my God, this is such a ridiculous trade to be in. Like, it's pushing me around all the time. And that's generally what the market operator is trying to do. They're trying to confuse you with the volatility, knowing that if they can push you out of the position and reaccumulate that back at the bottom of the box, it only plays out better for them. So that's what happened with Link. You saw this multiple up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, woo, and then finally the breakout for the 44% move outside of the box. And again, I suspect we're going to see higher, probably upwards of the $25 range over the next 6 to 12 months. Now, this is all in the backdrop of the S&P 500 going to do all-time highs. New all-time highs for the S&P 500. I remember when we were way back here at the bottom, all the mainstream media, Jim Cramer was screaming recession. And one of the things I postulated then, and it turns out I was right about, because sometimes we are right. Luckily, it seems to be more often we're right than wrong. And when we are wrong, we know how to cut that loss quickly enough so that it doesn't bleed into a total failure. Protecting capital is equally, if not more important than making more capital. So, if you don't have any to lose, I guess it seems more important to make capital, but nonetheless, not losing capital is extremely important sentiment. So this looked like a reaccumulation after decline. There's a few reasons for this. I feel confident that when governments go into this place of criminality, they just start printing. They want to give as much money to as many people as possible to overcome the criminality with monetary heroin stimulus known as M2, the monetary 2 supply. And today we've breached again into new all-time highs for the S&P 500. Now, one of the worrying things here is that we've seen no recourse or check for the top of the box. I would suspect somewhere around here. Let's just for a quick moment take a look at the RSI. We are seeing some divergence for the RSI. So again, I do suspect we'll see some upside and some downside for both Bitcoin and the rest of the assets here. So you'll want to keep a close eye on that because the S&P 500 is a large driver for much of the sentiment. So even though over the next 6 to 12 months, I'm ultimately bullish, there's still some volatility potentially on the horizon. So there's no need to rush into positions. You should have already been building positions for the last long time. If you're into trading, there's a bunch of chop on the horizon, so I wouldn't get too excited about diving all in. And if you do, as I've stated kind of a few times to myself and to everyone, if you're trading, stop losses are helpful because they protect your capital. If you're investing, and just investing consistently is a much easier way to go than trying to get in and or out of positions or having a stop loss at all. In fact, in my early days when I was using a stop loss for just general trading, it almost always worked out negatively for me. If you're leverage trading, a stop loss is almost always a must because it's really easy to end up then losing capital or at least having a threshold for being like, okay, that's enough. I'll try again later. So I just want to give a quick update. I finally got my camera working again. It was a huge pain in the ass, but it looks like it's permanently fixed. I got a hardware solution. Oh, there we go. I don't want to touch it. Otherwise I'm going to break it. I got a hardware solution, which looks like a permanent solution. So more videos to come here in the future. I'm on a quick little family vacation in the Gulf of Mexico. So I'll be updating with the private group too. You guys should get an email in the next few days. I'm finally back, basically, and the family flies back to Canada in the next week or two here. So I'll be full on in my regular production updates. So, I was chatting with some friends and realized, you only get so many family vacations with your parents as they get older. So if you can spend time with your parents, make sure you do that. If you haven't called them in a while, call your fucking parents. It's always a smart thing to do. At least if you like them and they like you, I don't know, maybe you don't have a great relationship with your parents. But either way, quick little update. Ultimately, long-term bullish. There's some sentiment that's providing choppiness in the ecosystem, so make sure your positions are in a rather offensive place more than defensive. But if you're playing with something like leverage, then be a bit more defensive with what you're doing. Just a quick little update. We'll be back again soon. This is Tio with the Arcane Bear.